everybody. Welcome to the Mentor Minutes podcast, a segment of the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel. I'm Jared.
And I'm Jay.
And welcome back. We've been talking a lot about our top 10s lately,
Yes.
different games, different box covers, a lot of artwork discussions. But
game types, but yeah.
We're doing another top 10 today, but it's more of a side to the gaming hobby.
Yes, yeah.
Do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, let's call it like maybe the gaming hobby adjacent, let's say. So we thought, let's talk about our top 10 favorite board game accessories. And this could be, at least the way I made my list, is it's things that I buy in addition to the games or to complement, say, my game room that... for me, just make the hobby more convenient or just add something to the hobby for me personally.
Right. So these are things that are not like game designer published necessarily.
Yeah, that's right. Not game expansions.
Not expansions
explicitly,
like and something that you would add on to a game or to your game table.
Yes.
Or for, for having people over and
yeah, just kind of, to me, enhancing the overall experience. That's the way I looked at it. And
sure.
And as far as the way you organized your list from sort of your number 1 to number 10, did you have sort of a method to why you did it the way you did it, or?
I tried to. I had 12 overall, so I have kind of 2 honorable mentions, and I ordered them by ones that I use the most and importance, I think, for regular play.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I did too. I there was certain things that I would probably like better, but I ranked it based on like how much I actually use it, and how much I think maybe if I didn't have it, how much it would affect me. Maybe is there was the way I thought of it. So it sounds like
general importance.
Pretty much the same thing. Plus, we've got a couple other exciting things to talk about as well that are coming up soon that you'll either hear on the podcast or see on one of the YouTube videos. We're going to be actually interviewing a couple of new game designers, which should be pretty exciting. One is an interesting spin on tile placement that involves bees. It's called Hibernation.
Cool abstract game.
It's a cool abstract game. We'll share some of our thoughts when we're talking to the designer there. There's another larger sort of 4X epic space game that we're going to be playing on Tabletop Simulator with the designer. That game is called Tux Rebellion.
And I think after we play through that, we'll have him on to the podcast as an interview, just to talk about the game and kind of delve into that.
Yeah, process he went through, how he designed a huge epic game like that.
And then, he's also a first-time designer, but I mean,
he is, yes.
The game and the components and the scale of this thing is huge.
Yeah,
like it looks pretty epic.
You can tell that a lot of love and work has been put into this.
Yeah, I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, me too. And we're actually going to play that tonight, but that'll come out on a later episode.
Sure.
And then another game called Tailmore, which is a really interesting sort of dungeon crawl game, but it uses QR codes and your mobile phone to interact with characters. Think sort of, one of those like the crime stories. What is that game?
Chronicles of Crime.
Chronicles of Crime. Where you scan objects, you scan characters with your phone.
You scan the rooms, you can combine things.
It gives you backgrounds. You can combine objects.
Use this item on this.
Yeah, it's kind of a neat RPG sort of turn-based combat system as well that plays out on the app. It's
really cool. I think there's a lot of story and a lot of love made into this, and the app and the website type of integration into this is really quick, really solid, and everyone is using their own phone for their own actions, and it's like simultaneous play.
I've never really played anything like that before.
It's pretty quite cool. Unique. I really like the design and what he's doing with it. I also want to say that this game reminds me of if you had a tabletop version of one of those older Sierra games like Space Quest or the point and click adventures of LucasArts. It's very reminiscent because of how you kind of interact. Instead of point and click, you scan and select.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it was a really cool experience to be able to do that on a tabletop. But I don't want to get too further into it because I know we're going to have him also on the podcast, and we'll talk a little bit more about that from the designer himself.
Yeah, so a lot more to come. Stay tuned.
So for this episode, since we're doing our top 10, I think we'll go ahead and get started with our number 10 from Top 10 Board Game Accessories.
Okay.
Number 10. My number 10 pick is a item that I feel like most people need. You may already have some of these, but you may not always remember to have them available. And these would be drink coasters.
Ah, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
All right, because everything you do is on a table, and at some point someone's going to be thirsty, and oftentimes, whether it's beer, soda, water, you don't want it spilling, nor do you want it making rings on your table or your neoprene mat.
Yes, yeah.
So
Definitely.
I would always recommend having several drink coasters nearby.
No, that's actually a really good one because it's one of those things I didn't put on my list, but yet I think I use it so much I didn't even think about it. So yeah, good pick. I like that. Coasters. And I've got some cool ones too. They're like little
you
NES
always
games.
have coasters.
I do.
And I was
always
like,
have coasters.
you have to say that.
Yeah, no, I think it was just so common. I didn't think about it. Kind of like chairs. I didn't put chairs, but that would be a good one too.
Chairs.
So
Having chairs.
yeah, but that's a good one. So you're number 10.
That was my number 10.
Drink coasters.
How about you? What do you got?
So my number 10 is kind of an obvious one, and it's funny that I missed the coasters, but it's the game table itself. And the reason that I mention that is that, and the reason it's my number 10 is when I think of the table, I think of an actual table made for gaming that has, a nice sort of like what is it called? The rim of the table where you can rest your elbows on and it's kind of sunk in the middle. What I like about game tables that I've played on is that it just sort of puts the whole focus of your experience on the game. There's something about just that kind of sunken in feeling that a game table produces. And of course, the size of the table matters as well because if you've ever tried to play a larger game on a smaller table, it can just be a mess.
I'm looking at you, Mind Clash.
Yeah, all those games that take up a huge amount of real estate. But for me, I don't have a gaming table, although I've got one that I did a Kickstarter on. But that's been one of the biggest choices that I made since I got in the hobby was choosing the right size table, the right height and things like that.
Investing in the right table.
In the right table. And especially I think if you're going to make the investment, although it's not, it's a luxury item, but buying an actual game table that has a topper is also great because you could have a game like, say, Gloomhaven, that you just leave out on the table, and then you can put the game topper on top of it, and then play other games on top, so you don't have to keep on taking down and putting away those larger games. So yeah. I'm looking forward to that. So that's why it's my number 10.
I think it's funny that you first preface you're not going to pick chairs because chairs are just too obvious.
Yeah, I did, but I chose the table.
You chose the table. Where most people have like a dining room table that's at least large enough for like 4 people to sit at.
Comfortable chairs would have been a good pick, actually.
Comfortable chairs
would have been a good pick. Yeah, that would be my honorable mention.
Well, I still feel like those are a bit of a... I understand why it's number 10 because it's certainly like more of a luxury that you have a custom type of made for gaming table.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's
absolutely
priority.
not a necessity, which is why it's my number 10.
Less priority.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's talk more about the more higher priorities. Starting with moving on to number 9. Number 9.
My number 9 is actually component upgrades for games. So a lot of games that I like don't often come with. They come with standard, like say wooden or cardboard components, but there's a lot of companies that will make
sometimes plastic.
Sometimes plastic.
Don't forget all our miniatures games.
That's true. Although sometimes I've actually bought upgrades that are miniatures just to upgrade from wooden pieces too. That's
like
true.
Dune Imperium. And if you want to hear more of our favorite miniatures games,
that's right.
We have a podcast episode about that. So
hey, don't criticize my choices.
Criticize your memory.
Yeah, my memory. Oh, that Kemet, that still haunts me.
I forgot that Kemet was a thing.
But just component upgrades. I mean, this could cover. Typically, when I think of component upgrades, I think of mostly the bits that you're playing with at the table, like your meeples. I've gotten like for some of the games I actually have stickers that I've bought that you can put on the wooden meeples that actually, nice. Yeah, they actually look like a character instead of just a piece of wood. I've had upgraded. Like I think of Everdell, you can buy like an upgraded like wooden tree, for the center of the board. Yeah, I don't have that one yet.
Well, Everdell also in their current Kickstarter, they're offering stickers for the Meeples.
I heard this too. I know it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to.
I'm gonna be getting those.
Think about that.
I'm gonna be getting those. It's one of my favorites.
And sometimes it's just upgraded bits. Like, for a lot of Stonemaier games, they'll come with tokens. Like I'm thinking Wingspan.
Yeah.
They came with cubes.
Eggs.
Yeah, they came with pretty awesome things like the colorful eggs and stuff like that. But then when you're using like the cubes to move and do actions, they're just wooden cubes. So there are some upgrades that actually give you birds shaped, meeples. There are other upgrades they have for the game where the food, which are usually just these round tokens that have berries or worms, actually have the shapes of the creatures and stuff on them. And then there's also like the Board Game Geek store.
How about Scythe?
Yeah, Scythe has tons of
all those resources.
Upgrades.
Yep.
Yeah,
the steel little pieces.
I was going to say Scythe even has like metal miniatures and everything.
Yeah.
So all those kind of things I look at as component upgrades, and to me they just really enhance the game experience. They're again a luxury item, I think.
It's nice to have.
But they're nice to have. They don't affect the gameplay, but to me they just kind of pull you into the world of the game a little bit more. So that's my number 9.
I like it. My number 9 is something that I think, and I'm not OCD, but I feel like I like having things organized. So this is one that if you have it or if you're interested, get a label maker.
Oh yeah.
If you have a label maker, you can label all sorts of stuff with your components and games and how you organize things, whether it's as simple as putting your name and number on, or in the game in case you're bringing it to a con and, people forget whose game it is, you can pull a little sticker in there. Or if you want to put stickers on the baggies that you use so that you remember which components go in which bag.
That's a good idea.
Those are fun little additions that you can do if you have a label maker. And then you just kind of get refills as you need. I like it just as far as organizing. It also, I find, helps when, there's a lot of things to put away. And if you're the only one that knows where everything goes, it takes longer to, to de-set up, right, to put things back. But if everyone's like looking at the bags, like, oh, this says I need to put, the wood tokens in here. And then all of a sudden everyone can help you.
Yep.
So it's a nice little addition. Certainly not necessary, but if you like having things really organized, then I recommend a label maker.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've never done that yet, but I've noticed you have done that with your games. I've often thought about it. So yeah, I think that's a really good pick. So less crossover than I thought so far.
We'll see.
Interesting.
We'll have to see. Number 8. My number 8 pick is a kind of a classic component or accessory that a lot of people might think about, but it's really only useful in games that have dice rolling, and it's a dice tower.
Yeah.
If you have, whether it's a small table because you didn't upgrade it, or, the game itself takes up a lot of space and there's a lot of components that when you roll the dice, it might mess up everything. A dice tower is a really handy tool to have, and you can easily pass it around, or, if you get a cheaper one, you just get a couple to sit around the edges of the table so everyone has one accessible. But by no means you don't have to do that, but just having one is really handy, and just prevents messes on the table or dice rolling off the table and any arguments that may happen,
Because it landed on a 6.
It's like, oh, it was a 6, so I'm going to keep it. And you're like, no. Because, my house rolls, and it should be everyone's. It only counts on the table.
Yes.
Right. But if it falls off, you got to roll again.
Yeah.
But with a dice tower, you don't have to even worry about that. So
yeah, good pick.
That's my pick.
That is a good pick. So for my number 8, this is one that I only got fairly recently. It wasn't until a couple years after I was in the hobby that I bought one, and that's a laminator. And a laminator is great, especially for games that have like really thin sort of paper components like player aids or player sheets. I've even laminated some smaller games with the game board because the game board was a kind of a real thin, almost cardboard too. Some of, like, believe it or not, Ryan Lockett's original games. Oh. Like, I think it's Artifacts Inc. or, Artifacts Inc.
Throwing some shade.
I love Ryan Lockett games though. But, they were small box games. They had, small, kind of thin boards that were more like a glossy paper. just to protect them. I've done that. And even like with newer games like Dune Imperium, one of the games I really like.
I'm thinking the original printing of Underwater Cities.
Okay.
Those boards are pretty thin.
Pretty thin too?
Even Great Western Trail, I've actually laminated the player mats because they are pretty kind of thin.
And that's probably the primary use I've done because a lot of times, like with Dune Imperium, your player mat is actually like your special ability as well. And so, and it's not really, some of these things are almost like postcard size boards, so they're not great if you're looking for sleeves and things like that.
Yeah, it's
so,
too big to sleeve them.
Yeah, you got a laminator, you run it through that thing, you cut it off, and it just protects it. Also, it protects it from spills as well.
There you go.
Because you can easily just wipe it off. So
unless you have a really good drink coaster where it doesn't move.
That's true. You need what are those like space things? That
or a special coaster, which isn't really a coaster, but one that you can attach to the table.
Those are nice.
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah, maybe I'll get those for the game table. So that is my number 8.
Good pick. Number 7.
For 7, again, this is more in the luxury item, at least the way I look at it. But this is a game organizer.
Okay.
And this could be like a broken token organizer. It could be a folded space organizer. What I didn't realize when I got into the hobby was how much time you waste when you're setting the game up and then when you're putting it back. And in some cases, like Scythe, if you play with Scythe with like all the components and things like that and expansions, I mean, it might take you 20 minutes or more just to set the game up.
Try Caverna without an organizer.
Yeah, even worse, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so having those organizers that, especially the ones that, have little kind of trays that you just pull out of the box and just sit on the table for, tokens and resources and everything else.
So not just for organizing, for putting away purposes, but for
use.
Functionally playing it during the game.
Yeah, and I think I've had different kinds. Like I've got a folded space, which is like almost like a thick styrofoam that you kind of punch out yourself and you kind of glue together. And then I've got a really nice like broken token organizer for Dead of Winter.
Yeah.
I prefer the wooden ones. I think they're just a little more...
It's like a beechwood type of thing.
Yeah, they're a little more sturdy. They're a little more... They kind of, I don't know, they feel like they fit a little bit better and they can just look better on the table as well. But the folded space ones, which are a lot cheaper, are also really good, especially for just keeping things organized in the box. So for me, a component organizer in the game box is a big plus. And for any games that I really, really love, I will typically go and maybe splurge a little bit more and buy one of those organizers. So that's my number 7.
I think that's an important accessory, certainly for those games with all those components.
Yes.
So I like that pick. So my number 7 pick is a similar type of accessory. It does similar types of things. It's a silicone cupcake cups.
Yes, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And you could also just put like bowls out on the table, but these are really cheap. They're flexible and various colors, and just having a bunch of them on the table so that either players keep their pieces in it or resources are stored in there. It just kind of keeps everything organized and neat on the table instead of just thrown piles all over the place.
Yes.
And again, that kind of falls back into my not OCD, let's just keep the table organized sort of mentality behind some of these picks, which I didn't intend, but apparently that's a thing. So it's for just a few dollars on Amazon or something like that, you can get a whole bunch of these little silicone cupcake things. They're reusable, obviously. They're solid enough to hold the heavy upgraded tokens, not just cardboard. So they work really well for that intended purpose.
And they're washable too.
They're washable.
So if you spill something because you're not using coasters, there you go. That's a good
wow,
pick.
Maybe coasters should have been alive.
Coasters, my new number 1.
Oh wow. So anyway, that's my pick for number 7.
That's a good pick.
Number 6. So my number 6 pick has already been mentioned by my buddy Jay, and this time I'm talking about upgraded components.
There you go. Okay.
/ metal coins.
Yep. Yeah, I should have mentioned metal coins too, because I throw that in there.
Yeah, I do, and that's why I included it with this pick, but I wanted to specify that includes metal coins, because a lot of games, they may not have like resource tokens or other things that you can upgrade, but most games, tend to have some kind of currency, and having a custom or thematic type of metal coin that goes with the game is just very satisfying. Like playing Brass Birmingham, with metal coins is just a better experience. And think about like playing poker. Like it would be a whole different experience if you didn't have chips and you just had paper.
Yeah,
I mean,
like picture playing poker with Monopoly money.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Yep.
nah.
Yeah,
It's not as interesting.
Not as exciting.
And cardboard is cardboard, it rolls and bounces. But metal, it's got weight to it. It got that ching sound.
And psychologically, you think it's
Yeah.
money, you just kind
Yeah.
of make that conclusion. Yeah.
And then you drop it, it doesn't go everywhere. It just kind of goes where it's supposed to.
Yeah.
But all of the upgraded components that you can find. I tend to go with Top Shelf Gamer.
Yeah, they make some
their
great.
website.
They're the ones I think that made those Wingspan upgrades
Yeah,
too. I was
they
talking
did.
about.
And
Yeah,
in fact,
they're really good.
when so Scythe, Stonemeyer, when they originally started doing upgraded tokens, they made their own for Scythe and some other games. And then Top Shelf Gamer basically took on those resources and began producing them. So if you're looking for those, because they're no longer sold at Stonemeyer's site, they moved on to Top Shelf Gamer. So they're all kind of all together for where you might find upgrades. And those guys are really cool.
And good quality stuff.
Very
really
good
quality
very
stuff.
good quality. I tend to source those components for a lot of different games.
Yeah, and one thing to mention too is I think maybe of the upgrades, metal coins may be my top one of the upgrades too, because you can get some pretty generic metal coins and then use them for multiple games. Whereas if you're just upgrading, like say the components of a specific game, you're only going to use those. So a good set of metal coins is going to really get its value pretty quickly.
Yeah, even if you just have one big set of metal coins and just keep it on the table, you can just bring them out when you need to.
Yeah, it's a good plan. I like it. Good pick.
Thanks.
Okay, so my number 6 is one you actually introduced me to that I had never heard of before.
Oh,
And this is vinyl tape.
there you go.
So, for anybody who was like me that didn't have any clue what vinyl tape was, what I used to do with all my cards, because I'm not a sleever, so I suspect you might hear more about sleeves later, but I don't usually sleeve my cards and my games very, very often. So I was just putting the cards in plastic bags.
Because he has strong drink coasters.
That's right.
Doesn't have to worry about spills.
This is going to show up every time. So I was just putting, the cards in appropriately sized bags and things like that. So Jared told me about this stuff called vinyl tape, which is exactly what it sounds like. It looks like Scotch tape, but it's not sticky. It's made of vinyl, and when you wrap it around a set of cards,
it's not. It doesn't have any adhesive.
Yes, it doesn't have any adhesive, but it sticks to itself.
Right.
So I found that that's super convenient because you can get a roll of it. You can make the piece of the tape, exactly the size that you need for the stack of cards.
Just cut it.
And then since I started using that, I don't hardly even put my cards in bags at all anymore.
Don't need to.
Because they're stay
solid.
They stay nice and solid in the box. And I don't know, it's just a lot more. I don't know, it's more satisfying. You don't have to hunt for a bag, and just wrap the tape around and you're done. So vinyl tape is why it made my number 6. I really like it.
I'm glad it did, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was a good pick. Good recommendation.
It's a great accessory. Number 5.
My number 5 is another crossover, and that is a dice tower. So I said a dice tower / dice tray, basically. But it's just something that when you have games that have a lot of dice, it's great to be able to roll those and know they're going to stay on the table. And I have a few smaller dice trays that I like because you can just throw them in a backpack or throw them in a bag, and they're collapsible and things like that. But I also found that dice trays are great too, especially if you can get those ones that are sort of lay flat, and then you snap the edges to make like a square or an octagon type shape. But just being, like you said, just being able to roll your dice vigorously and not have to worry about them, getting lost under a couch or falling on the floor or whatever, I think is a big plus. And so anytime I bring out a dice game, I always bring out a dice tower or a dice tray. So that's what made my number 5.
I agree with that. My number 5 is something that involves the table, but is not a table. It is a neoprene mat.
Yes.
We're sitting at a table right now with a neoprene mat on it.
We are. Yeah.
And even without playing a game, it's just a nice texture. It's a nice thing to rest your elbows on.
Yeah.
When playing games with cards, especially, it's easier to pick up cards because you can kind of push down a little bit to pick them up instead of like scratching at the card until you ruin them.
Or like sliding it all the way off the table.
Yeah, or sliding it off.
To pick it up.
And then who knows what kind of spills or stickiness on the table like you just slid the cards through. I mean,
I was going to say because you didn't use
because you didn't use a trick stick.
This is just, we're just going to keep saying it until it's
Sliding
funny.
up to the one. So it's just, I think it speeds up play as well because you don't have to like find a route off the table to slide off a card. You just pick it up where it is and it's much easier. The board itself, like every component that's on the table now is protected from the daily use of stickiness and grime and dirt or glitter if you have kids like myself, or glue that would normally be on a table unless you have a dedicated board game table.
That's true. That's true.
That only does board games.
Yeah.
So I think a neoprene mat is probably a better first step than buying a $600 table.
Totally agree. And before I did the Kickstarter for the game table, I actually bought a mat that I could keep downstairs for whenever I played on the kitchen table. And it was for that exact same reason. You don't have to worry about if there's sticky stuff on the table or whatever getting all over your games. You just roll the mat out. The bottom of it's like a rubber surface.
Right. And it sticks really well to the top of most table surfaces.
And it's just real comfortable to play on. So I totally agree. That's a great pick.
So I would put this above like a luxury thing. Like I feel like this is almost necessary.
Especially
if you have a table that it has multiple uses.
I agree
I would
with
say
that.
this is a pretty necessary thing once you start using it for a lot of different games.
Yeah, I think that would be. I totally agree with you.
Cool.
Good pick.
Thank you. Number 4. For number 4, this is, again, something that I use a lot that some people may not have or even think about, but it's so useful when you're the one bringing stuff to other players and other people's houses. A game bag.
That's a great one.
A bag that is either big enough for a lot of different games or made for board gaming. It's got padding or it's got different pockets. I have one that was funded a few years ago on Kickstarter, and they had logos and all that stuff on there. There's a little tag that's got a Meeple on it, so it's actually a board game bag. But if you don't have like a custom board game one, I would point you to Cajon bags. I can't speak enough highly about it because as a musician, like I'm very familiar with the Cajon instrument, and as a drummer especially, I've used a lot of hand drums. A Cajon is basically a box drum, and it's just a box made of wood, and to protect it and to help transport them, they've designed like a gig bag for that, and it's basically just a box, and it's got zippers.
Rectangle. Yep.
A rectangular box, but it's padded. It's got zippers, so you can open the whole thing and just kind of slide out games from that stack.
And they usually have like straps. Like
there's ways, there's ways to easily put it on your back. You can carry it like to your side or off your shoulder. So having a really good and useful and big enough game bag is a really nice upgrade accessory as a hobbyist board gamer to invest in.
Yeah, that's a great pick, and it might have been on my list if I had thought about that as an accessory. That would make my honorable mention, I think. But
like Kemet.
But but pro tip: Amazon sells those bags, those Cajon bags, for like $20, or at least they used to.
Non-sponsored.
Non-sponsor. But they're also the perfect size for like a Ticket to Ride size box.
Yeah, most standard size boxes will fit in a Cajon box bag.
Yeah, great pick. And I've used various ones. You can also get some pretty decent ones that are made for games from like Miniature Market. Those aren't too expensive as well.
But once you start finding like custom or game-centric bags, they tend to get more expensive.
Way more expensive, Yeah, so I'd say start with the cheap and then work your way up, because the cheap ones won't last just long. Good pick.
Thanks.
Okay, so for my number 4, I chose a speaker, and particularly like a Bluetooth speaker.
Like an Alexa or Google.
Yeah, like an Alexa. If I say it, it'll probably turn on. Yes, a Google or other brand, Amazon brand speakers is a great choice. The reason for that is a lot of the games that are coming out now, especially some of the more thematic games, will have built-in audio into, say, an audio app. So if you play with something like, say, the Mansions of Madness,
or Forbidden Waters.
Forbidden Waters is one of the best ones, where it has audio, especially like a lot of audio narration. I think a speaker is really key to that, because I think the sound is just so much better than playing it off, say, your phone or even a PC speaker or a laptop speaker. But what I probably use it the most for is background music. I'm a big fan, and Jared knows this, is I'll almost always put some type of music, usually nothing with lyrics, but some sort of, thematic music that kind of fits the setting of the game. If I'm playing like Takedo, I might put in some like Zen, really Zen music, or if we're playing a medieval game, some sort of medieval minstrel type music or whatever.
Nice.
So for me, a speaker is really key, and I just think it adds some great ambiance to the gaming experience. So that's why I made my number 4.
That's a great idea, and I completely forgot about the speaker.
I got one.
Yeah, so you got that on.
I got you an honorable mention.
Number 3. Moving on to your 3.
And for my number 3 pick, this is another crossover, and that is a gaming mat. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, everything you said, and especially if you are someone or you have friends who maybe bite their nails or don't have very long fingernails. I mean, having a game mat for picking those cards up is such a huge deal.
It's like you can't even understate how important or make a difference that it makes.
It does make such a huge difference, and they make all kinds of different ones. I prefer the ones that are more like the mouse pad type material, that neoprene style. They're also pretty easy to pack because you can roll them up and they don't wrinkle, very, very easily.
And you can get either like a solid color just for every game, or you can get custom made ones
Sometimes
with
dual
different
side,
cool patterns and colors.
Yeah, a lot of, and I would even include individual player mats too, because sometimes like people who play Magic, they'll have their own small sort of mat for that.
Yeah, and those Magic the Gathering mats are basically a player-sized mat, and you don't even have to be playing Magic the Gathering, but just have one for every player, just to have something in front of them.
Yeah, and before I bought one that was more like the table size, that's what I used, and I would just give people that, and especially during card games. But I think it just I use them for every game. I just think it makes the whole experience better. There are other ones you can get that are also, they call them speed cloth. Those are typically for like when you're playing poker because you want the cards to slide across them. Those aren't ones that I usually recommend for board gaming, although they're fine. But anything that has a little bit of a thickness, like 3 millimeters or higher, is usually a better choice. So
I kind of like the extra thick neoprene, just because as
Those
you
are
rest
really
your
nice.
arms on it, it just kind of feels like a pillow for your arms.
Yeah, that's true.
I just like that.
Yeah, I agree. So that's for me why it made it aside as it did on my list as well.
I agree completely. My number 3, you've already mentioned, and I kind of expected some of these top 5s to have a little bit of crossover. My number 3 is vinyl tape. I use it so much. I've as I started using it originally years ago, and then I run out of a roll and I have to buy more, and then I'm like, oh, I'll never need any more, and then all of a sudden I need more. So I use it a lot for basically every game that I have that has cards in it. I'll wrap those cards in vinyl, and it saves room in the box. So especially a game that has a lot of components in a very tiny box, or a small, fit for everything, whatever that may be. If you vinyl tape the cards, you have basically eliminated a lot of air pockets that happen when you put them in a plastic bag.
That's a really good point.
And you don't even think about how much air is sort of lost, or I should say taken up in a box when you have just tons of baggies. And baggies are great for resources and little components, but when it's cards, again, there's like that much extra air that you then have to like fold up or rubber band, and that doesn't always happen. And so the vinyl tape is just a nice way to get those card decks solidified and stacked nicely.
Yeah, and I just like what you said, I forgot to mention it too, but when I had started using that vinyl tape, I realized how much more space I had in the boxes for that exact reason.
That's what happens.
So,
once you start using it, you're like, wow, this makes a big difference.
I can fit an expansion in here.
And I would say they work even better if you sleeve your cards, because they actually then also stick to the sleeves of the cards.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although you might make up some of the air difference, right, because of the sleeves, but I don't know. That's another topic for another day.
We're not going to talk about that.
That's a card sleeve debate. Good pick.
Number 2. We are climbing up this list, I gotta tell you. But we're at number 2. My number 2, and I just kind of mentioned it all, is having plastic bags.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of games tend to come with plastic bags these days, but they often don't give you the right size that you want. So I find that any time that I get a chance to get baggies, you know, from various sources, you know, whether it's like my medicine came in a plastic bag, I'm going to save that.
Save the bag, yep.
Those are much better than any of the Ziploc ones that are just kind of a standard size and, you know, they don't feel as nice or they're kind of cheaper. Those Ziploc bags, while great for snacks and food, they're really only meant for like one use. What you want are the thicker plastic bags that have all kinds of sizes, small to big, and I've got a whole drawer dedicated to plastic bags because there's so many sizes. And I've just ended up collecting them all, you know, because I never throw them away. I always end up using them. And a lot of times because of the custom sizes or just having smaller bags for components where there's less of them to put a bag in, I end up, you know, not using the big bags that came with the game. You know, I put those away and, you know, use it for some other game and use the ones that are a best fit for each component. And if you remember my label maker suggestion, having all the different size bags, having them also labeled also helps so that you don't have to look for the right size and forget which one goes where.
And plus with the thicker bags, you know, the labels are fit better anyway. Because if you try to put a label in like a Ziploc bag, they're just so thin, that plastic.
It breaks the bag, honestly. So that's why, again, you got to get some good baggies. But I think once you start playing some games, you're going to end up collecting some if you, you know, if you do it right.
Yeah, I agree. Excellent pick.
Thanks.
Excellent pick. So my number 2 is one that you have mentioned as well, and I said game trays or game bowls. You use like those silicone cupcake kind of containers. I tend to I'll buy, like I actually have some right here. And for those watching, you know, game trays,
like plastic little containers.
Plastic ones that are made for, you know, bits. Or I'll even they make these real thin ones that you can buy on Amazon. They're actually for weighing like medications on a scale. They're real thin plastic. I think they're called like pill containers or something.
I've seen those.
I don't know the exact term, but you can get, you know, like 100 of those for, you know, $10 or whatever. But I find that anytime I've got components where typically I just don't want them to mix all together, you know, especially like different denominations of coins, you know, or pieces that are very similar. I'll either put those directly in the game box and I'll just pack them, the game box with the trays already, so they become kind of their own organizer as well. Or I'll just get some generic ones and put them out whenever we have a game with big components. So for me, game trays, game organizers, are component organizers that you keep outside and reuse.
Something to sit on the table.
Are huge, yeah. And I've never got the silicone cupcake ones, but I think I've seen that people get those. I've seen people get like the cheap like bowls. So whatever you can find that works for you and works for your budget, I'd recommend.
And if if you're really tight on money and maybe you have to wait, you know, for your next paycheck to get even the cupcake holders, if you have those little medicine cups, the little paper cups.
Oh yeah.
You just drink your medicine.
Idea. Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Just get a bunch of those. Again, that's like $1.
Yeah, 50 pack at the local drugstore.
I mean, they're not as reusable, but if you're on a budget and you know you want to save up for something else or custom game trays,
that's a good recommendation. I never actually thought of that.
That's an option.
That's a very good option. So that's why it made my number 2.
I got you. Honorable mentions. Before we talk about our number 1s, we do want to share some of our honorable mentions, as we often do. And I had just a few, not very many this time, because I forgot about the speaker.
Yeah, I only had a couple as well.
So. Yeah. So why don't you share a couple of what you have here for?
Yeah. So again, these are sort of like, again, I put these in the game table category. But one is a television or a monitor. The reason I say that is, again, some of the games that I have that are app-based games, like Mansions of Madness, another one is Imperial Assault, or even Forgotten Waters. You can, putting the image of the app on the screen can kind of help with some of the immersion there. I don't use it for a lot of things, but for certain games, having just a big screen that's next to the game table that you can use to project an image, from your phone or any of these sort of app-based type games, is a nice thing to have, but certainly not necessary. So This is one of the ones that I use probably the least of everything in my game room, but it's nice to have it. I'm glad I have it.
Yeah.
So a television or a monitor is one of my honorable mentions. You want to go with my next one?
Sure, go ahead.
And my next one is this is again more aesthetic. It's more about the room, but it's good lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And the room I have now does not have great lighting in it for games, and it is amazing how much lighting will affect the experience that you have, especially if you're in a room where like you get a glare on part of the board, so you can't really see the game board
Everyone's
very well.
kind of shifting every time they want to look at something.
Yeah, so I'm working on replacing my lighting in my game room because I have the lights that kind of shine directly down on the table, and ideally if you have lights that actually shine up on the ceiling, and sort of you get the
ambient light.
And as long as it's bright enough, that's a much better solution. So for me, I had to mention it because I think it's super important, but it's also something that you can solve pretty easily.
Yep. So I actually have 4 that I can talk about.
Yep.
One is a laser pointer.
A laser pointer.
Instead of having a big stick to point at things when you're teaching or trying to point at things, you just get a laser pointer and be like, there it is. That there.
I've never seen this done, but it's a good idea.
It's great. As a board game teacher myself, and I'm always teaching, if I had a laser pointer right there, it just helps, reaching across, especially those big spread out games that are all over the place. And it just directs everyone's attention as needed.
Well, plus with COVID, it's a lot more sanitary.
It is more sanitary.
Everybody's pieces.
They also make like keychain laser pointers that do a horizontal line, which is really helpful if you're playing a tabletop game where line of sight is important. You just shine the little horizontal beam on the table, and now you can see whether or not there's line of sight.
It's almost like those levels that like that. I've never even
really
thought of
nice.
that.
Now
That's
don't buy one that's like meant for levels because those are like stationary. But if you just get like one that is a laser pointer keychain type size that you can
a vertical line,
do
or
a horizontal line. It's very useful if you play those kinds of games.
That's a smart idea. Yeah, a lot of miniature gamers, I think that's a great tip.
Right.
Yeah, good tip.
Especially like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that.
And you had a couple more too.
I do. So one is a magnifying glass.
I thought about putting this down, but you're right. I do have one of those as well. For small card, especially fonts.
Some games and some people have difficult time reading the small text on various things.
Looking at you, Everdell.
Yeah.
And some of the Stonemaier stuff too.
But there's also a lot of times where maybe the gameplay text on a card or something is big enough, but there's flavor text that you want to read. And a lot of times you just kind of miss it or can't see it. So if you want to protect your eyes, the eye strain, or help someone who's having difficulty because we're just trying to play the game and they're trying to read something. Having a little magnifying glass sitting at the table is a nice, gesture.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I have one for that reason. I usually don't have trouble reading too much, but I definitely know I will in the future too.
The organizer that he was mentioning, as far as like organizing in the box, my honorable mention is having a Plano box, which is like kind of for fishing tackles and stuff. You can customize the organization on those because they're cheap. You can find them at craft shops or fishing places where you find fishing equipment. And those you can get different sizes, and like I said, a lot of times you customize where the different components fit into different squares and boxes. So even if it doesn't, if it's not meant for the game, or even doesn't even fit in the game, like for instance, my copy of Dinogenics with the expansion has so many dinosaur meeples and all this stuff that I can't get it in the box. So if I'm not going to put it in the box, I might as well get a Plano box organizer to have it all out. Because it also, facilitates setting up and gameplay.
Well, I've seen people do that with, they use those for like different types of dice too. Like they'll have a bunch of different dice in those.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I almost mentioned those. Have you seen those photo boxes? They're it's a box that has slots for a bunch of different. Like the old school like photos that you'd have that you'd actually
the film rolls.
Not film rolls, but the Polaroids that you'd have, or the regular sort of almost postcard size photos, 3x5s. Well, they sell boxes where they have individual sort of plastic containers that fit those size photos, but you can have like 18 of them, let's say, in one box.
Oh, that's interesting.
And what I've done is, for a lot of my card games, I've actually taken the card games and put the card games in those boxes because they fit a regular size card game really well.
Yeah.
And then you can just slide the whole thing out. It fits good on a game shelf, and you don't have a bunch of little tiny
Yeah.
boxes everywhere.
Yeah, and that kind of all
goes along
falls
with
into
your-
Plano organizers.
Yeah.
And the last one that I wrote down, he actually included on his list, which is a laminator.
Yeah,
It
yep.
just barely didn't make the list because it's not as needed. Because not every game necessarily needs to have
Yeah.
laminated stuff.
Yeah.
But the ones that do, it's always useful to have a laminator. And once you have a laminator, you don't have to buy another one. You just buy the
Yeah.
extra, sheets that you need to use, and then do what you need to do.
And they're pretty cheap too, which is
Nowadays
another bonus.
they're quite cheap.
Yeah, yeah. Good. So we're on
Did you
to
have any
our,
others, or?
Nope, that was all I
All right,
had
cool.
for my extra credit.
Great. So I think we're ready to talk about our number one
Number ones.
picks. Number one.
So my number one is one you've already mentioned, and this is the one that of any of the other things I've mentioned, I don't think I could live without, and that is bags, extra bags. And for all the things you said, I won't repeat everything, but what I found is as my collection started growing, anytime I would get a game that I would use, say, other organizers for or containers to store components, I would always recycle those bags, keep those bags, and then I just kind of kept building up a big collection of bags. So I rarely need to buy them separately because I have so many different sizes that I've used. But anytime I get a new game, I'm always going there to get a bag that fits better. And especially you'll find, like, I really like to organize all of the players' components into a single bag.
Me too.
And almost no games give you enough bags to do that with. They
It's a shame.
usually have them all together, in one bag and all that.
Right.
So that's probably the primary thing that I use them for, is just making sure I separate the components, just to make the setup a lot faster.
Yep.
So yeah, if it wasn't for having bags, my game boxes would be way less organized.
Right.
So that's why it had to be my number one.
Yeah, if you're someone that has a drawer full of baggies, you're either a board gamer or a drug dealer.
It's only one of the
It's
other.
one of those.
Look around for shelves, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah. And so like all these different organizing types of things that we've been talking about, collectively, whenever I get a new game, I can't just pull it out of the box and play it. Like, it's going to take me an hour or more sometimes to punch everything, to organize everything, to label things, to all that stuff.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot that goes into
It's a labor of love, but it saves you a lot of time on the other end. So you
Oh,
invest
yeah.
a little bit up front, but then it makes every time you play that
It's
game a
kind
lot
of fun.
faster.
I mean, after you kind of used to doing it a while, it's kind of a rite of passage to be able to play the game.
That's true. Yeah, and I do find, we should do like a top 10 on, things that we like about gaming that don't involve the game at all, like punching cardboard. Things like
I don't know
that.
if I can do that.
I don't know if I can find 10 maybe.
Yeah, there's only
But
like two.
I do find it kind of relaxing to do that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Well, my number one pick is something that's I've been doing for years, and it's a better experience for everybody playing. It's card sleeves.
Yeah.
And
I knew this would be your number one.
It's got to be my number one. Like, I use these for every game that has cards, and there's so many different sizes, custom for every card size. I've sourced them from various places. My current go-to place is Sleeve Kings. I like their, they offer 110 sleeves per pack instead of the normal 100. And the thickness isn't too thin, and it's not too thick either for just keeping them all together in a box without taking up so much space. So having decent quality thickness to the card sleeves, it improves, I think, shuffling, because then anyone can just kind of push the cards together, and they do it nicely instead of having to riffle, shuffle, or bridge, and then that adds more wear and tear to the cards over time just from shuffling. So I mean, if you've ever, like, before board gaming, I was into poker a lot, and if you've played poker and use the deck, after a while those decks fall apart. You shuffle them so much, then you got to get a new deck. But with board games, you can't really replace those decks.
Yeah.
So having card sleeves protects them from just normal wear and tear. In addition, as he was mentioning, just spills or, dirty fingers touching your cards, or stains, or, whatever that could touch the card and irreversibly make it not, nice looking,
Yeah.
not pretty anymore. So I fully endorse, looking at getting card sleeves. It is an expensive add-on because you do have to end up getting a lot of sleeves for all the cards that you have. You can't, if you take one game and only sleeve half of it, you can't play with it. So, if you sleeve Gloomhaven, you can't just do these cards. You got to sleeve like all 1,800 cards.
Really for me, the reason I think this didn't make my list is because I don't have. I'm one of those people who's guilty of not playing games a lot. Because my collection's pretty big. I'm trying to actually get rid of more games than buy more. And for me,
stay tuned for giveaways.
Yeah, more giveaways. Because I wasn't. Most of the games I don't play enough to where that's a concern for me. Mm-hmm. Although I have sleeved some of the games where they're games where they're very card driven, where you're holding the cards in your hand like a long time. Mm-hmm. Some of those games like No Thanks. Mm-hmm. I'd sleeve those because you're going to just be holding the cards every single time you play.
I agree. Any game that you're either holding cards a lot or having to shuffle cards a lot.
Yeah,
that would be a good game to do. Or like you said, just games that you play a lot.
Now you're an expert on this. Do you find that they take up a lot more room in the box when you sleeve them, or have you ever had a situation where once you sleeved the cards, you couldn't fit them in the box that came in?
So that happens in one of two ways. Either the box is too small and the card sleeves themselves are the extra thickness, and sometimes that becomes an issue. But mostly it only happens when there's a game insert that was made for the game. Then that insert is too small for sleeved cards, so you have to kind of ditch that insert. But then it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Especially
then you have more room.
Then you have plenty of room, and if you vinyl tape those cards afterwards,
they're not sliding around
for all sorts of stuff.
And a lot of the board game publishers they're actually making their boxes to be able to fit.
They're thinking ahead for
they're thinking about people who like to sleeve. So you'll notice that a lot with Kickstarters that they're doing that too.
Yeah. So there's very few times where I can't sleeve a game because it wouldn't fit. Games that are only card games, I've actually made my own boxes for those, since of course the sleeves won't fit in those tiny boxes that a lot of card games come in.
Right.
So I end up making a box so that I can have sleeved cards for them just to protect them.
Hey, there's where one of those photo cases might work for you then, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. They're still not super thick.
Yeah, they have to be thick.
They have to be pretty thick. So I don't know if that's.
It depends on how many cards are in the game, because it does add to the height of how high a deck would stand up.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's all my picks for these accessories.
Yeah, this was interesting. I think we had some crossovers, actually less than I thought.
I was very surprised that card sleeves was not on your list.
Only just because I just don't use them as much. I think for most people it probably would make their list.
Yeah.
For me, just because I'm not actively doing it, I didn't. And plus I knew it was going to be on your list. So.
Well, there's always that.
So it's good.
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm curious if you're listening and you maybe some of these ideas you didn't think of. What are some of your favorites that we mentioned, and maybe there's some that we didn't talk about.
Yeah. What did we forget?
What have we forgotten? What should have been on this list? What's on your list? Send us a comment or a message of some sort. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and thanks again for listening and watching, and we're going to continue to try to mix up some of our topics like this as well from time to time, so I think we've got some pretty interesting stuff coming up.
Yep, and again, stay tuned for those interviews that are going to be also an episode themselves, so we'll have a little bit of a break from some top 10s. But if you have some topics that you'd like for us to discuss, if you want to hear what we think on something, once again, let us know. We'll consider talking about those things as well.
So for Mentor Minutes, I've been Jay.
And I've been Jared.
Catch you next time.
See you later.